here on the story that I will live. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to story time. We'll be kind of a bit closer.
It's raining today. Look, you can see it on the...
Yeah. So we're going to carry on with our Jungle Book story, written by Rudyard Kipling and read to you by me. Yesterday we had a new story. We went away from Mowgli and the jungle creatures, and we went on to a story of little Kotick, the sea lion? No, the seal. Was he a seal? The white. Something like that. A seal, yes. You don't get any white seals, so this is a story about him. His skin colour is different from everybody else's. Or fur colour. Anyway. Yeah, and he's been finding out that some men have been killing his brothers and sisters, his kin. So we're going to carry on from there. He's just been told by lots of people who know they know what's going on. They're just like, get over it, Kotick, get over it. And that's what we're going to carry on from today. Halfway through chapter 4, I think, yes. That autumn, he left the beach as soon as he could and set off alone because of a notion in his bullet head. He was going to find Sea Cow, if there was such a person in the sea, and he was going to find a quiet island with a good firm beach for seals to live on, where men could not get at them. So he explored and explored by himself from the North to the South Pacific, swimming as much as 300 miles in a day and night. He met with more adventures than can be told, and narrowly escaped being caught by the basking shark and the spotted shark and the hammerhead, and he met all the untrustworthy ruffians that loaf up and down the seas, and the heavy polite fish and the scarlet-spotted scallops that are moored in one place for hundreds of years and grow very proud of it. But they'd never met Sea Cow, and he never found an island that he could fancy. If the beach was good and hard, with a slope behind it for seals to play on, there was always the smoke of a whaler on the horizon, boiling down blubber, and Kotick knew what that meant. Or else he could see the seals had once visited the island and been killed off, and Kotick knew that where men had come, once they would come again. Where men they come, you know what I mean. He picked up with an old stumpy-tailed albatross, who told him that Kerguelen Island was the very place for peace and quiet. Kerguelen! And when Kotick went down there, he was all but smashed to pieces against some wicked black cliffs in a heavy sleet storm with lightning and thunder. Yet, as he pulled out against the gale, he could see that even there had been once a seal nursery. And so it was in all the other islands that he visited. Limoshin gave a long list of them, for he said that Kotick spent 5 seasons exploring, with 4 months' rest each year at Novastoshnah, when the Holushchiki used to make fun of him and his imaginary islands. He went to the Galapagos, a horrid dry place on the equator where he nearly baked to death. He went to the Georgia Islands, the South Orkneys, Emerald Island, Little Nightingale Island, Gow's Island, Bowvet's Island, the Crossets, and even to a little speck of island south of the Cape of Good Hope. But everywhere, the people of the sea told him the same things. Seals had come to those islands once upon a time, but men had killed them all off. Even when he swam thousands of miles out of the Pacific and got to a place called Cape Corrientes, that was when he was coming back from Gow's Island, he found a few hundred mangy seals on a rock, and they told him that men came there too. I'm not sure that is mangy seals, maybe mangy, I'm not sure. That nearly broke his heart, and he headed round the Horn back to his own beaches. And on his way north, he hauled out on an island full of green trees, where he found an old seal who was dying. And Kotick caught fish for him and told him all his sorrows. Now, said Kotick, I'm going back to Novastoshnah, and if I'm driven to the killing pens where the Holushchiki, I do not care. The old seal said, Try once more. I am the last of the lost rookery of Masulfuera, and in the days when men killed us by the hundreds, thousands, there was a story on the beaches that someday a white seal would come out of the north and lead the seal people to a quiet place. I am old, and I shall never live to see that day, but others will. Try once more. And Kotick curled up his moustache, it was a beauty, and said, I am the only white seal that there's ever been born on the beaches, and I am the only seal, black or white, who ever thought of looking for new islands. That cheered him immensely, And when he came back to Nova Scotia that summer, Mutka, his mother, begged him to marry and settle down, for he was no longer a holloose chick, but a full-grown sea catch with a curly white mane on his shoulders, as heavy, as big, and as fierce as his father. "Give me another thievin," he said. "Remember, mother, it's always the seventh way that goes furthest up the beach." Curiously enough, there was another seal who thought that she would put off marrying till the next year, and Kotick danced the fire dance with her all down Lucannon Beach that night before he set off on his last exploration. This time he went westward, because he'd fallen on the trail of a great shoal of halibut, and he needed at least 100 pounds of fish a day to keep him in good condition. He chased them till he was tired, and then he curled himself up and went to sleep on the hollows of the groundswell that sets into Copper Island. He knew the coast perfectly well, so about midnight, when he felt himself gently bumped on a weed bed, he said, "Tide's running strong tonight," and turned over underwater, and turning over underwater, opened his eyes slowly and stretched. Blimey. Turning over underwater, opened his eyes and stretched. Then he jumped like a cat, for he saw huge things nosing about in the shoal water and browsing on the heavy fringes of the weeds. "By the great Combers of Magellan," he said beneath his moustache, "who in the deep sea are these people?" They were like no walrus, sea lion, seal, bear, whale, shark, fish, squid, or scallop that Kotick had ever seen before. They were between 20 and 30 feet long, and they had no hind flippers, but a shovel-like tail that looked as if it had been whittled out of wet leather. Their heads were the most foolish-looking things you ever saw, and they balanced on the ends of their tails in deep water when they weren't grazing, bowing solemnly to one another and waving their front flippers as a fat man waves his arm. "Ahem," said Kotick. "Good sport, gentlemen." The big things answered by bowing and waving their flippers, like the frog footman. When they began feeding again, Kotick saw that their upper lip was split into two pieces, so that they could twitch apart about a foot and bring together again with a whole bushel of seaweed between the splits. They took the stuff into their mouths and chomped solemnly. "Messy style of feeding, that," said Kotick. They bowed again, and Kotick began to lose his temper. "Very good," he said. "If you do happen to have an extra joint in your front flipper, you needn't show us so. I see you bow gracefully, but I think I should like to know your names." The split lips moved and twitched, and the glassy green eyes stared, but they didn't speak. "Well," said Kotick, "you're the only people I've met uglier than Thievich, and with worse manners." Then he remembered in a flash what the burgomaster girl had screamed to him when he was a little yearling at Walrus Islet, and he tumbled backwards in the water, for he knew that he had found Sea Cow at last. The sea cows went on slooping and grazing and chumping in the weed, and Kotick asked them questions in every language that he'd picked up in his travels, and the sea people talk nearly as many languages as human beings. But the sea cow did not answer, because sea cow cannot talk. He had only 6 bones in his neck, where he ought to have 7, and they say under the sea that prevents him from speaking, even to his companions. But, as you know, he has an extra joint in his foreflipper. Do we know this? Apparently we do. In his foreflipper, and by waving it up and down and about, he makes a sort of clumsy telegraphic code. By daylight, Kotick's mane was standing on end, and his temper was gone, where the dead crabs go. Then the sea cow began to travel northward very slowly, stopping to hold absurd bowing councils from time to time, and Kotick followed them, saying to himself, "People who are such idiots as these would have been killed long ago if they hadn't found out some safe island, and what is good enough for the sea cow is good enough for the sea catch. All the same, I wish they'd hurry." It was weary work for Kotick. The herd never went more than 40 or 50 miles a day and stopped to feed at night and kept close to the shore all the time, while Kotick swam round them, and over them, and under them, but he couldn't hurry them on 1/2 mile. As they went further north, they held a bowing council every few hours, and Kotick nearly bit off his moustache with impatience, till he saw that they were following a warm current of water, and then he respected them more. One night they sank through the shiny water, sank like stones, and for the first time since he had known them, began to swim quickly. Kotick followed, and the pace astonished him, for he never dreamed that Sea Cow was anything of a swimmer. They headed for a cliff by the shore, a cliff that ran down deep into the water, and plunged into a dark hole at the foot of it, 20 fathoms under the sea. It was a long, long swim, and Kotick badly wanted fresh air before he was out of the dark tunnel that they led him through. "My wig!" he said, when he rose, gasping and puffing into open water at the farther end. "It was a long dive, but it was worth it." The sea cows had separated and were browsing lazily along the edges of the finest beaches that Kotick had ever seen. There were long stretches of smooth, worn rock running for miles, exactly fitted to make seal nurseries, and there were playgrounds of hard and sloping inland behind them, and there were rollers for seals to dance in, and long grass to roll in, and sand dunes to climb up and down, and best of all, Kotick knew by the feel of the water, which never deceives a true sea catch, that no men had ever come here. The first thing he did was to assure himself that the fishing was good, and then he swam along the beaches and counted up the delightful low sandy islands, half hidden in the beautiful rolling fog. Away to the northward, out to the sea, ran a line of bars and shoals and rocks that would never let a ship come in within 6 miles of the beach. And between the islands and the mainland was a stretch of deep water that ran up to the perpendicular cliffs, and somewhere below the cliffs was the mouth of the tunnel. "It's Novostothnia over again, but 10 times better," said Kotick. "Sea Cow must be wiser than I thought. Men can't come down the cliff, even if there were any men. And your souls to seaward," too many S's, "and your souls to seaward would knock a ship to splinters." You would have thought he would have grown out of his lisp by now. "Oh, I can do S's," said Kotick. "And the shoals to seaward would knock a ship to splinters, if any place. In any place, in the sea is safe. And this is it." There we go. He's grown up. He doesn't do lisping anymore. He began to think of the seal he'd left behind him, but thought he was in a hurry to go back to Novostothnia. He thoroughly explored the new country so that he would be able to answer all the questions. Sorry, I said he wanted to go back, but he needed to explore first. Then he dived and made sure the mouth of the tunnel and raced through to the southward. But no one but a sea cow or a seal would have dreamed of there being such a place. And when he looked back at the cliffs, even Kotick could hardly believe that he'd been under them. He was 6 days going home, though he was not swimming slowly. And when he hauled out just above Sea Lion's neck, the first person he met was the seal who had been waiting for him. And she saw by the look in his eyes that he had found the island at last. But the Holluschickie and Sea Catch, his father, and all the other seals laughed at him when he told them what he had discovered. And a young seal about his own age said this:
"This is all very well, Kotick, but you can't come from no one knows where and order us off like this. Remember, we've been fighting for our nurseries, and that's a thing you never did. You preferred prowling around in the sea, didn't you? Eh?"
I added that last bit on for you. The other seals laughed at this, and the young seal began twisting his head from side to side. He had just married that year and was making a great fuss about it.
"Look at me!"
"I've no nursery to fight for," said Kotick. "I want only to show you all a place where you'll be safe. What's the use of fighting?"
If you're trying to back out, of course, I've no more to say," said the young seal with an ugly chuckle. "Me."
"Will you come with me if I win?" said Kotick, and a green light came into his eyes, for he was very angry at having to fight at all.
"Very good,"
said the young seal carelessly.
"If you win,
I'll come."
Shush!
Motorbikes. They're not good for story time. If he wins the fight, we'll take them to the place. Marvellous. He had no time to change his mind, for Kotick's head darted out and his teeth sank into the blubber of the young seal's neck. Then he threw himself back on his haunches and hauled his enemy down the beach, shook him, and knocked him over. Then Kotick roared to the seals: "I've done my best for you these 5 seasons past. I've found you the islands where you'll be safe, but unless your heads are dragged off your silly necks, you won't believe. I'm going to teach you now. Look out for yourselves." Limoshin told me that never in his life, and Limoshin sees 10,000 big seals fighting every year, never in all his little life did he see anything like Kotick's charge into the nurseries. He flung himself at the biggest sea catch he could find, caught him by the throat, choked him, and bumped him and banged him till he grunted for mercy, and then threw him aside and attacked the next. You see, Kotick had never fasted for 4 months, as the big seals did every year, and his deep-sea swimming trips kept him in perfect condition. And best of all, he'd never fought before. His curly white mane stood up with rage, and his eyes flamed, and his big dog teeth glistened, and he was splendid to look at. Old Sea Catch, his father, saw him tearing past, hauling the grizzled old seals about, as though they'd been halibut, and upsetting the young bachelors in all directions, and Sea Catch gave one roar and shouted, "He may be a fool, but he's the best fighter on the beaches. Don't tackle your father, my son. He's with you." Kotick roared in answer, and old Sea Catch waddled in, his moustache on end, blowing like a locomotive, while Nutka, and that's his mother, and the seal that was going to marry Kotick cowered down and admired their menfolk. It was a gorgeous fight, for the two fought as long as there was a seal that dared lift up his head, and then they paraded grandly up and down the beach, side by side, bellowing. That's quite nice, father and son. At night, just as the northern lights were winking and flashing through the fog, Kotick climbed a bare rock and looked down on the scattered nurseries and the torn and bleeding seals. "Now," he said, "I've taught you your lesson." "My wig," said old Sea Catch, boosting himself up stiffly, for he was fearfully mauled. The killer whale himself could not have cut them up worse. Son, I'm proud of you, and what's more, I'll come with you to your island, if there is such a place." "Here, you fat pig to the sea! Who comes with me to the sea cow's tunnel? Answer, or I shall teach you again!" roared Kotick. There was a murmur, like the ripple of the tide, all up and down the beaches. "We will come," said thousands of tired voices. "We will follow Kotick, the white seal." Then Kotick dropped his head between his shoulders and shut his eyes proudly. He was not a white seal any more, but red from head to tail. All the same, he would have scorned to look at or touch one of his wounds. Yeah. A week later, he and his army, nearly 10,000 holluschickie and old seals, went away north to the sea cow's tunnel, Kotick leading them, and the seals that stayed at Novastoshnah called them idiots. But next spring, when they'd all met off the fishing banks of the Pacific, Kotick's seals told such tales of the new beaches beyond Sea Cow's tunnel that more and more seals left Novastoshnah. Of course, it was not all done at once, for the seals need a long time to turn over things in their minds. But year by year, more seals went away from Novastoshnah and Lukannon and the other nurseries to the quiet, sheltered beaches where Kotick sits all summer through, getting bigger and fatter and stronger each year, while the holluschickie play around him in that sea where no man comes. I'm going to sing a song about Lukannon. I'm not going to sing it, I'm going to read it. Yeah. That's your picture. Yeah, Lukannon. This is the great deep sea song that all the St. Paul seals sing when they're heading back to their beaches in the summer. It's a sort of very sad seal national anthem. I'm not going to sing it. I met my mates in the morning. I know, but I'm old. We're roaring on the ledges, the summer groundswell rolled. I heard them lift the chorus that drowned the breakers' song. The beaches of Lukannon, 2 million voices strong. The song of pleasant stations beside the salt lagoons. The song of blowing squadrons that shuffled down the dunes. The song of midnight dances that churned the sea to flame. The beaches of Lukannon, before the sealers came. I met my mates in the morning. I'll never meet them more. They came and went in legions that darkened all the shore. And through the foam-flecked offing, as far as a voice could reach, we hailed the landing parties and we sang them up the beach. The beaches of Lukannon, the winter wheat so tall, the dripping crinkled lichens, or is it like lichens? Never mind. And the sea fog drenching all. The platforms of our playground all shining smooth and worn. The beaches of Lukannon, the home where we were born. Lichen. I think it's lichen, but it's lichen sounds better. I meet my mates in the morning, a broken, scattered band. Men shoot us in the water and club us on the land. Men drive us to the salt house like silly sheep and tame, and still we sing Lukannon before the sealers came. Wheel down to southward, Oh, Guvaruska, go, and tell the deep-sea viceroys the story of our woe. Ere, empty as a shark's egg, the tempest flings ashore, the beaches of Lucannon shall know their sons no more. Deep. Like the sea, am I right? Ha. Happy ending that. Yeah, that was quite a nice little story. Cool, right. I will catch you guys later. I think, there'll be a few more installments because there's a few more chapters of this book, so yeah. May you be well, and God bless you, and I'll catch you soon, tomorrow evening.